The holiday season does not stop. It just continues to give. As we welcome you to the College Football Today Bowl Bonanza, live right here on this final Saturday of 2024 on SportsGrid. He is the mastermind of the college football pigskin. That is Joe Lisi. He is OK Dubs. That is Kevin Walsh. And I am Ben Stevens. We hope you had a lovely Christmas week. You have enjoyed this holiday season, and you have enjoyed all that bowl season has given us. Sure, the college football playoff in the opening round a weekend ago, as we will break down here on this CFT Bowl Bonanza, was a snoozer in most spots, but bowl season, Lisi guy, has delivered high-scoring affairs. Not 2, not 5, 6 overtime games that we have seen, and we have 8 bowl games to get you set for on this Saturday. And we also look forward to just a few days from now in the quarterfinal round of the college football playoff.
Oh, nothing better than this. The games over the past few days went right down to the wire. There was parity, great contest in terms of the bowl matchups. We saw the game last night, Texas A&M and USC to end it for the week. I mean, dynamic performances, 8 bowl games today, Kev. And then the calm before the storm in terms of the semifinal playoff games. 4 great matchups. We'll see how it plays out a little bit later in the week.
Yeah, so much to get to, and we'll get to the playoff. But let's start with the positive, which has been bowl season so far. Take it from someone who's working every NFL primetime game. The Shield would kill for a game as good as the Hawaii Bowl, or maybe literally any bowl. What's the worst bowl? I couldn't even tell you. They all rock, they all rip. What, Sam Houston? That team won as a dog. They were the only dog that was barking. That was pretty electric. KW Bowl Challenge, thank you very much. I mean, it has truly been one of the most interesting kind of set of games up until this point. To some degree, it's like it can't last. It can't be this good. But if bowl games are to be meaningless, the most meaningless you would imagine would be against teams that, with respect, spend the majority of the season not in the conversation. We're not invested. We don't care. These games have been unbelievable. Yeah. And the opt-outs and, this is going to ruin the game. Syracuse-Washington State last night was the most I was into any bowl game of the year, arguably, because then you got the spread drama at the end, and the Cougs get the cover that they deserve. The people tucked under a blanket, cozy, sleeping on the right side of the bed. It was beautiful to see. The bowls have been phenomenal this year.
Kev, I think we are seeing that these bowl games, for those who are there, for the programs that are invested, still retain that meaning and significance, and we have seen it in the play and in those betting wagers. Edges to be had if you pay attention to college football, and hopefully have learned a thing or two this season on College Football Today, because if you are in the know, you have an understanding of all of the meaning that we have in bowl games and who will be out there for a roster in these bowl games. Kev, even for teams like USC last night, a dreadful and disappointing season, finishing with just 6 wins. Yeah. Down by 3 scores to Texas A&M late in the third quarter, an underachieving Aggies team as well. Those are the spots where you would think, all right, maybe they'll just pack it up, head into the offseason, and try to figure out the future of the program. We saw Southern Cal come all the way back in Sin City to win a huge game in Las Vegas. All of these things, the late game drama, how it has been from the betting perspective, it has been a sensational bowl season, and one that we will celebrate on this Saturday.
Again, you mentioned bowl season. There are people out there yesterday that if they waited long enough covered with Oklahoma catching 1.5 against Navy. And you mentioned USC. I'm not kidding. I think that's Lincoln Riley's best win as the head coach of USC football. I know there's a win over Notre Dame in there, but gosh, did this team need something like that to salvage a very disappointing season. I know last year was disappointing, but it was relative. It was Caleb. Wheels fell off the track somewhere along the way. The offseason for USC has been so bad. There's been a part of me that's thought, this guy's already coaching in the NFL. Somewhere, someone gave him a deal, and he's just letting everybody leave. They needed a little bit of momentum, Lisi, and they legitimately, I think, got it last night in Vegas.
Yeah, and they did it last year, too, with Miller Moss against Louisville, right? He lights it up for 6 touchdowns, and they carried that into the offseason. I'll take a team like Arkansas, right?
Sure.
Taylor Green comes back for that offense. You saw him light it up. 80 yards on the ground, 341 through the air. They carry that. They could potentially be a contender maybe in the SEC if that defense can step up. And that's what it's all about.
Yep.
Seeing these teams in terms of the offseason, getting the younger players work. Michael Hawkins, that got work yesterday for Oklahoma. At some point, they're going to develop and be counted on for the 2025 season, and that's what it's all about. These games are fantastic. It's not the college football playoff. It's football, and it matters, and that's what bowl season is.
And we can find those edges for you. As we have said, it is the College Football Today Bowl Bonanza on this final Saturday of the calendar year here in December. 8 college football bowl games at the FBS level on this Saturday, the most we have in a single day during bowl season all year long, and we will enjoy. But we are also just a few days away from the next round, the quarterfinals of the college football playoff in the first ever 12-team field. Here is where we stand as we get ready for New Year's Eve on Tuesday night. The Fiesta Bowl out in Arizona between the 3-seed Boise State and the 6-seed Penn State. The Nittany Lions, the most victorious team, or at least by the largest margin that we saw in the opening round exactly a Saturday ago in State College. You'll see all of the other games as we give you those early looks here in just a moment. But Lisi, guy, the excitement of bowl season was not necessarily met with the excitement of our opening round and our opening weekend of the first ever 12-team field in the college football playoff. A lot of groans from those about the actual field, who was there, who wasn't. And the games were not exactly the tightest margins that we had seen. Average margin of victory, 19.3 points per game in the first ever opening round in the first ever 12-team college football playoff. What was your reaction to the first round a weekend ago?
Well, just the pageantry and seeing those home games in terms of the playoff environment, that's what encompasses college football. Now, granted, they were blowouts. The cream rose to the top, but it sets the stage for these semifinal playoff games this coming Wednesday. This is what it's all about. And it still gives the opportunity for Cinderella to potentially step up. We didn't see that, but we saw that one matchup in terms of Texas and Clemson. They were within striking distance, and that's all you can ask for, Kevs. Give some of these teams a shot. It's not a perfect recipe, and we'll figure it out across the way, but it was still dynamic atmosphere in terms of the first-round playoffs.
So we can, and I think we will, talk about the who was in,
right,
who was out, the SEC, all of that. Truly, though, let me cover for the committee a bit. Some of this isn't even remotely their fault. They believe that Texas is the third best team in college football. They shouldn't have been playing. Penn State, the fourth. They shouldn't have been playing. Clemson, the 16th. They should have been nowhere near this thing. Boise and Arizona State given byes. Something not the committee thought was deserving. I really believe this. Maybe I'm out to lunch. I don't know if anybody agrees, but it is consensus that the format of the playoff is atrocious. There is not one person I have heard defend this format.
Yeah.
I understand it takes a lot to implement massive change. Oh, we're adding 4 more teams. We're stripping away, auto bids for conference champions. It takes nothing to say, by the way, the seeds 1 through 12 is how the playoff will be seeded. I believe the round 1 results and potentially the ensuing round 2 games will get us immediate change to the format.
I think that is coming. I think this format will be fixed in the years to come. How that all works with the TV rights and the contracts and everything that we have seen, the buy-in from the conferences, that will be a little bit outstanding. But as we look at this format right now and just the results of the games that we have seen, we'll give you our takeaways, what it means moving forward in this first ever 12-team bracket. A quick reminder that we tried to share last week. Do not let recency bias cloud your judgment. In the semifinal era, in the 4-team format, 10 years, average margin of victory, nearly 18 points per game. Blowouts have always been a thing in the college football playoff. What will we see moving forward? That's what we discuss up next.
anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Live right here on College Football Today. It is the final Saturday in the month of December. It is the last Saturday in 2024, but it is not our final game day of this college football season in this calendar year. 8 bowl games on this Saturday. It's the CFB Bowl Bonanza, but we are now just a few days away. In fact, only 3 days away from the next round, a quarterfinal round of the college football playoff on New Year's Eve. How do we reach this stage? We look back now on the opening round, the blowouts that we saw and what we can take away as we paint the path moving forward, still in the continuous chase for a national championship. We'll go in seed order with the highest at-large seed in their matchup. And Lisi guy, that means we start in Austin. It was our second game of 3 exactly a week ago. The 5-seed Texas taking on the bid stealers and the champs out of the ACC, number 12, Clemson. It was actually the closest game that we had entering the fourth quarter, or at least in the fourth quarter, our only game of the 4 in the opening round that had a single score margin in the final 15 minutes. Clemson scored a touchdown with just under 12 ticks remaining. And then Jaden Blue, 2 plays later, broke off a 77-yard run for the Longhorns, and Texas never looked back. The Longhorns cover as a 13.5-point home favorite by the hook, winning by 2 touchdowns at home.
Yeah, dominated in the trenches. They rushed for 292 yards on the ground. Wisner and Jaden Blue tore it up and put the pressure on Clemson to match them score for score after Clemson built a 7-0 lead. And when you just look at that defense, they held Clemson guys to 76 yards on the ground, 3.1 yards per carry, and they're going up against a run-heavy offense now in terms of Arizona State with Cam Scatterbo. So that is the matchup. I mean, just offensively, I think Texas is built both ways. They can run it. They can throw it with Quinn Ewers. They can get into a lower-scoring game. They can also run tempo as well. This game, if it gets into the 50s, Texas can go toe-to-toe and blow for blow with Arizona State. It's critical for Arizona State, in my opinion, to dictate the tempo in terms of this matchup, utilize the physicality of the rushing attack, see if they can sustain drives, score first, get this into a lower scoring game, and I think they have a shot. Spread-wise, 13.5 is a huge number and a tough ask in this type of matchup. I know Texas has the athletes, but early on I would lean to Arizona State.
So I want to talk about Texas's resume for a second.
Please.
Because understandably, when people were pulling apart Indiana mostly and somewhat SMU, the point was made about, well, what has Texas done? Which was fair to a degree, but Texas has always looked like a national title contender. I understand that they only played of top teams, Georgia, and they could not get through the true kings of that conference. But it was another example where, because so much of the round one takeaways were based on who deserved a seat at the table and who did not, Texas is now the favorite to win the national championship.
As you alluded to last week, entering that triple header on Saturday.
I just don't think that we have to, when we are having these conversations, right? Not everything is equal, right? I understand that Texas, ultimately, right, if you go, how many wins against bowl teams or ranked teams? I got you. Does anybody here think that Texas was not one of the top teams in college football? No. So it's just, to me, when we relate this moving down through these other games, Texas, again, flashed that obviously they belonged in this spot. And now we are sitting here looking at a team who some of us, me, don't even think they're playing their best quarterback, and they're the national championship favorites. I mean, that is damn impressive out of Texas.
And the largest favorite entering our quarterfinal round of the college football playoff. They laid 13.5 at close against Dabo's Tigers. They will be nearly a 2-touchdown favorite against Kenny Dillingham's Arizona State in our opening game of 3 next week, or as we get ready for New Year's Day, which is Wednesday. A quick programming note, by the way, we will be here, College Football Today, that is on Wednesday starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Time for your entire college football playoff on the opening day of 2025. So Texas a perfect 5-0 against the spread now in non-conference matchups this season. The largest margin of victory was in our 6-11 matchup in Happy Valley. The Nittany Lions winning by 28, 38-10 over SMU. We were here for the additional hour to preview some of the games in the National Football League last Saturday as well, but also to watch the early goings of the first ever round in the CFP 12-team format. And Lisa, guy, we saw an SMU team early driving against a good Penn State defense, but a couple of mistakes by Kevin Jennings were only multiplied later in the opening half. 3 interceptions thrown by the Stings quarterback, 2 taken back to the house by the Nittany Lions defense, and Penn State never looked back. 38-10, a huge victory for James Franklin and co. last Saturday in State College. What stood out to you most?
Well, the defense, again, opportunistic. They play like that, they're going to be very difficult to beat the rest of the way. It's the offense. Will they get challenged through the playoffs? Maybe not from Boise State, but in a semifinal, 14 playoff, does a team like Notre Dame or potentially Oregon, whoever they play, along the way, do they challenge them in terms of an offensive perspective? The one thing I took away as well, when you look at Drew Aller, he made some solid plays. The physicality in terms of the rushing attack, they're running the football very well heading into this matchup. If you are Boise State, you want this game to resemble what you did in terms of that matchup in Eugene earlier in the year. Madsen only threw for 148 yards. You relied on Ashton Genty in the rushing attack. He ripped that defense for 175 plus. If you could get that type of effort, they'll be within margin, because a lower scoring game, in my opinion, favors Boise State in that matchup. That would take a lot of pressure off their defense.
Our takeaway from that game won't be popular, but it's SMU didn't belong in the playoff. And they should send massive thank you cards to Indiana for taking up all of the space that people were complaining about. Indiana's resume was significantly better than that of SMU's. SMU didn't do anything like what Indiana did to Nebraska, beating Washington by 14 points with a backup quarterback. SMU played BYU, they lost. Oh, but they changed to Preston Stone. Okay. They played a Clemson team who was ranked 16th by this committee. But because everybody screamed and kicked and begged to keep out one of the pillars of college football in Alabama, the committee was bullied into putting SMU into the playoff instead of the Alabama Crimson Tide. I hope you enjoyed that game. It was atrocious.
The committee had SMU ranked 3 spots ahead of Alabama entering conference championship weekend. That was also part of it, but point is taken. More as we get ready for the quarterfinals up next.
anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
We are just a few days away from the quarterfinal round in the first ever 12-team college football playoff as we take one final look back on last Saturday in our opening round triple header in the CFP. The nightcap was all Buckeyes at the Shoe in Columbus. Ohio State hammering Tennessee in the 8-9 matchup, 42-17. The Bucks cover as a 7.5-point home favorite. A total that was our lowest of the four games in the opening round. Skies over 46.5. Kev, all four home teams victorious, of course, in the first round of the CFP. All four home teams booked as the favorite. All four home teams covered. A perfect 4-0 against the spread. First two games under. We saw a lot of scoring in our final two, capped off by maybe the most impressive performance Ohio State has seen this season.
Yeah, about a million different things we can do with this game here. Let's go to the Ohio State side of it. I'll do what Kirk should do, okay?
That being Herbstreit.
Yes. When people are – he said, oh, well, what are they – or, excuse me, actually really more so what Shannon should have done, right? Instead of yes, instead of threatening to beat up your colleague, why don't you come out and say – congrats, Ohio State, for winning a first-round playoff game that ultimately you were in because we expanded. This isn't the level at which we judge Ohio State on. Next game against Oregon is where we will decide whether or not Ryan Day should keep this job because, quite frankly, going out against Tennessee, throwing the football all over the field, which is obviously what you should have done against Michigan, does suggest that they own a insane amount of real estate within your head, or you don't know how to prepare for Michigan, and that is a problem. Again, not you don't want to mess with. I'm just saying, like, that's not a sports conversation.
Yeah.
Because it is fair to question Ryan Day's status going into that game. It is unsurprising that people then went, now what? But the follow-up is, now the Rose Bowl. Is Ohio State's season a success by any measure to any reasonable person?
No, not at all. No, not at all. And they're going to have to prove it against Oregon because
they are.
Heading into this matchup, Oregon is still, in my opinion, the most complete team heading into the playoffs. We'll see how that game plays out. But I will give props. Will Howard stepped up, 317 yards, 80% completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Defensively, they shut down Dylan Sampson and the rushing attack for much of the game, put the pressure on Nico.
Dylan Sampson was injured.
Exited that game early.
Yes. But what I'm saying is the rushing attack still was not a main component of that offense. They trailed 21-0 and then, got 10 garbage points in the second quarter and were never, left for dead in the second half. That is the defense that needs to bring it against Oregon in terms of this matchup if they're going to win the game. That's easier said than done. Again, that's not the base and success for Ohio State, but I'll just say this. Tennessee, paper tiger, you come out walking with no shirts on, you need a better effort. I mean, you want to show up your opponent on their field. Yeah. You need a much better effort in the trenches. That wasn't SEC football, and they didn't deserve to be in the playoff.
Interesting. They definitely deserve to be in the playoff. I think you could poke some holes in the resume that the Volunteers had to elevate themselves to make a deep run in the CFP. A dominant performance out of Ohio State. Later on in our show, we'll take an early look at some of the early lines for our quarterfinal round and our 4 matchups. But a reminder of the schedule, just 3 days away on New Year's Eve. Our final college football game of 2024. It is the Fiesta Bowl out in the desert between the 3-seed Boise State. By the way, a perfect 3-0 are the Broncos in Fiesta Bowls, including that magical Cinderella upset over Oklahoma many moons ago. Penn State, 10.5-point favorite in that matchup against Boise State. Then we have 3 games on New Year's Day. We'll be here starting at 10 a.m. Eastern time to preview each and every one, give you our best bets, and set the stage on quarterfinal Wednesday in the college football playoff. It starts with Texas laying 2 touchdowns against Arizona State. And then, Kev, as we have alluded to, those heavyweight bouts that we have. The rematch that we thought we would get in the Big Ten championship game, now under the San Gabriel Mountains in Pasadena, California, on the opening day of a new year. Ohio State, 2.5-point favorite against Oregon. They were the favorite by 3.5 on the road in Eugene. And then the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans to end out the night. It's Georgia, the 2-seed, against the 7-seed Notre Dame. The Bulldogs, a 2.5-point favorite as well.
Again, the most complete team, the unbeaten Oregon Ducks, are dogs. 1, the format is abysmal. And 2, in no world has Ryan Day done enough this season with this Ohio State football team.
We'll talk more about that. I like the conversation between the Ducks and the Bucks here, but we get you ready for the Bowl Bonanza next.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
Like, they may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today, they cover.
So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all people.
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoff.
Red.
This is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, I guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid. In the heart of winter, when nights grow long, we come together under these lights. A team, united by purpose, fans bound by passion, each holding a small flicker of hope in their hands. At SportsGrid, we believe that even the darkest nights can't dim the unity we share. One team, one stadium, one shining moment. This holiday season, we shine brighter together. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
We're a few days away from the second round, the quarterfinal round of the first ever 12-team college football playoff. And again, a reminder, college football today will be live on New Year's Day starting at 10 a.m. Eastern time to preview our 3 games in the CFP and react to the night prior on New Year's Eve in the Fiesta Bowl between Penn State and Boise State. On this Saturday, the final Saturday in the calendar year of 2024, it is the College Football Today Bowl Bonanza. 8 bowl games in this festive bowl season on this Saturday. The most bowl games on a single day, the entirety of bowl season. Yesterday we had 5. New Year's Eve we'll have 5 at the nightcap. That is the Fiesta Bowl and the CFP quarterfinal. But none more than today, Lisi Guy. 8 to be exact. And one of the final games on this Saturday is going to be one of the best. A battle of Big 12 foes, but in the Alamo Bowl, which is always a game circled in bowl season because of the teams that will play and the outlook for the season following. It is Colorado and BYU today in San Antonio, where the Buffs will have both Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter in this football game. And because of it, Lisi Guy, Colorado booked as a 3.5-point favorite.
Yeah, it could be a fast track, right? Alamo Bowl is always typically a high-scoring game. You have both teams averaging well over 30 points per game. Colorado with Shedeur Sanders averaging 327 passing yards per game. They don't run it all that much, 70 yards per game heading into this matchup. More balance on BYU. They're averaging 159 on the ground with L.J. Martin, 258 through the air. And this was potentially a Big 12 championship in the making. Right around week 14, they were on a collision course to potentially be in the Big 12 championship. I expect fireworks in this matchup. I think Colorado will lead, but I still believe BYU can run the football on that front seven of Colorado, Kev. They're giving up around 140 rushing yards per game. I expect a big day out of L.J. Martin. This game, I think, sails through the total, but I like BYU with the points.
Yeah, right now you have more 3s and 3.5s on the market. That certainly could be a key factor. I played Colorado laying the 3 points. I think this is a situation of out of sight, out of mind. Had these teams played at the back end of the Big 12 season, I think this is a much bigger number. BYU were viewed as one of the frauds of this sport, quite frankly. I'm not a bit. Like, that's
by the odds makers' perspective, for sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like, that's every single game people look, wow, that BYU number's too low. And then, like, oh, wow, they just barely escaped. And then eventually, it came due. Now, the Kansas team that kind of stopped the BYU train ultimately stopped the Colorado one as well. The difference, though, being Colorado was on the road and BYU was, almost a home dog at that point to a sub-500 Jayhawks team that ultimately didn't even end up finishing bowl eligible. But this is also a battle right now between the best pass offense within this league and the best pass defense in the Big 12. It's very interesting to have that type of situation where we're going conference on conference here. Well, if you look at the elite pass offenses within the Big 12, 2 of the final 3 games for BYU came against 2 of the better pass offenses in this league in Jalen Daniels and Sam Levitt, Arizona State and K-State. Combined, those quarterbacks, 9.5 yards per attempt. Shedeur Sanders is not here to do anything other than light this team on fire. I'll be looking for Shedeur Sanders props, but I think the nature of Colorado showing up with their guys in this game is why I'm laying it with Colorado.
Not only a Big 12 battle, as you said, Kev, both teams had their season upended in a way by those pesky Kansas Jayhawks, who salvaged a disappointing season by playing spoiler to many in the Big 12 championship race. But a top 25 tilt as well. The Cougs ranked 17th in the final college football playoff top 25. CU still in that top 25 as well at number 23. 6 of the last 8 full college football seasons, we have seen a top 25 tilt in the Alamo Bowl. It's why it's one of the best games each and every bowl season, and it often projects for the year following. For instance, in the 2022 Alamo Bowl, it was Texas and Washington, two teams that went on to play in the college football playoff the year following. And for CU, Kev, this game has its importance. It's rather shocking, in fact, that we are going to see two top 5 picks this coming April in the 2025 NFL Draft, both playing in this football game, in Shedeur Sanders, who is a minus 200 favorite to go first overall, in the Heisman Trophy winner in Travis Hunter. But I think it speaks to what Deion Sanders has done in this rebuild in Boulder, in the fact that CU is seeking its first bowl victory since 2004.
How is Deion Sanders anything other than, like, the greatest gift to college football? How is he not everything that everybody could ever possibly want? We have seen bowl season, right, take hit after hit with playoffs and NIL or whatever, everything that everybody blames it on. He has two guys that could go off the board 1 and 2 potentially, and he's like, yeah, we're playing. We're all good here. We're ready to rock. I mean, that is remarkable to think about that. And yes, for Deion, this is a very unique situation, right? I mean, Shedeur is his son, and Travis Hunter is like a son. Yeah. He was playing at Jackson State, right? But Deion he is setting the standard. He is setting a standard at Colorado, and I think it is one that I am sure some teams, some programs are going to try and say, hey, listen, you want to opt out, that's all you. But Shedeur Sanders is playing. Like, I'm not sure, Lisi, Sanders showing up to this game isn't a part of the reason we're going to break down Cam Ward playing for Miami later today against Iowa State.
No, it's a great point. He's done a fantastic job. I mean, just think about first season. He overexceeds expectations, 4 wins. The win total was 3.5, right? He's doubled that. He has the potential now to have his first bowl win under his belt, and that's what you want to see year-over-year progression. The one thing I am a little concerned about is the time off, and I know Travis Hunter's geared up, I know Shedeur's geared up, but there's 22 players on that team. When you have a train in motion, you don't want to disrupt that. And to be honest, the 3.5, I was a little shocked that line was as low as it was, because I do feel Colorado has a speed advantage, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I thought it would be more 4.5, 5 in that area. To see 3.5 is a little head-scratching, and the way that defense performed, especially in the front seven. Last year, they gave up almost 200 yards rushing per game. This year, they were down into the area of 148. That's where I think, from a physicality perspective, if they're not into it in terms of the first half, maybe BYU can have success on the ground with Retzlaff and L.J. Martin as it relates to the rushing attack.
More than 175 yards given up on the ground a year ago. Robert Livingston has come in for CU as the new DC and has made an immediate impact. You might see that Colorado allows 148 rushing yards per game and still think, this defense still can't cut it. They faced nearly 39 rush attempts per game. They're giving up just 3.8 yards per pop, and they're a top 15 sack defense in college football. 37 recorded this regular season, only 27 a year ago. But BYU's not too shabby either, Kev, as we look at the 10-win Kalani Sitake Cougs in this football game. Again, for a long time, the Big 12 favorites lost 2 of their final 3 games against Kansas and Arizona State. But we've got a Jewish quarterback leading BYU in a bowl game in San Antonio on the third night of Hanukkah. Talk about that. And a BYU team 4-1 outright this year in their 5 games, Kev, booked as the dog.
Yeah, I think for BYU, they are I don't know if they're being disrespected. It's just hard to grab any portion of the headlines when you show up in Colorado, again, as their top, 2 top 5 picks going within this game. What I do think is probably important to remind people is Colorado for 2 years now gets the Super Bowl level effort from any opponent they play because it's another level of stage. So for BYU, again, not many opt-outs on their side of the table either, Joe. Yeah. They know the opportunity here tonight.
And they're going to look to dictate tempo, push Colorado around, show that they're the more physical offense and defense in terms of this matchup. And again, that's why I think we'll have points, 55.5, 56, might be a little light tonight.
BYU over in 7 of its 9 games against Big 12 foes this year, 4th night of Hanukkah That's on me, a member of the tribe as well. We'll talk more about Travis Hunter, his props to see a Heisman Trophy winner on the field tonight in San Antonio. But next up, let's pop some tarts. Pop-Tarts Bowl next.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
They may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today, they cover.
So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred, or just worked on the side, or kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest, and we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
A new tradition during college football's bowl season. The second annual Pop-Tarts Bowl. A bowl that just gets it right from a branding perspective in appreciating all the unique assets that we have in college football. And a couple of really good matchups in its 2 years, including tonight in the Pop-Tarts Bowl between Miami, an ACC team left out of the college football playoff, and one of those other Big 12 teams in the chase for a conference championship, the Cyclones of Iowa State, that played in the Big 12 title, coming up short against Arizona State. Our second top 20 tilt or top 25 tilt, I should say, of this final Saturday in the month of December. Miami, 4.5-point favorite as we get you set for the Pop-Tarts Bowl against the Cyclones. Kev, you made mention of this earlier. Yeah. I do not think it is a coincidence that the good buddies, Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, who often compete against each other even in the offseason, have seen one step up in play and decide to do the same. 4.5-point spread in favor of Miami against Iowa State. How do you start your game breakdown for the Pop-Tarts Bowl?
So with my desire to bet every bowl game on the side, I have to be able to give myself some grace and not make a bad wager.
Yeah.
Last night, A&M USC, things ended up working out, although at 24-7 I was pretty frustrated. I didn't lay it with A&M and instead played the over. I say that because everything around backing Miami is tied to Cam Ward. Mm-hmm. It is tied to his availability. It is tied to him playing the length of this game. And there is still clearly some trepidation around what you're going to get out of Cam Ward in this matchup. So this is likely the one of the few games that we have today where I'm going to not play the side, though I lean Miami under the guidelines of Cam Ward is going to play the full game. That's because if Shedeur Sanders is going to light BYU on fire, Cam Ward is going to come in here like it's Game of Thrones with multiple dragons slaying everything in front of him. Just to give the perspective, BYU, I mentioned what they did against Jalen Daniels and Sam Levitt as a pass defense, giving up a combined 9.5 yards per pass attempt. Boy, that would have been nice for Iowa State, who played the same two quarterbacks this season, and in 2 games, 24 for 41, 514 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks, 12.5 yards per attempt, Levitt and Daniels combined. And now Cam Ward checks in a bowl game where it could just be, hey, throw it 50 times, kid. We appreciate you playing. Cam Ward through every number.
Yeah, he might get through every number. The biggest concern that I have back in Miami is motivation. You go for a team that was potentially a college football playoff contender, ACC title contender, and now they're playing Iowa State in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. That is the biggest thing, I think, when you look at Colorado and you look at Miami. Colorado on the way up, Miami, the last 2 games they lose, they stung, right? It really cost them in terms of their season. Is it a disappointment in terms of this factor? Not saying that Cam Ward isn't going to step up. And when you talk about those numbers that Iowa State gave up, especially to Sam Levitt, where they stacked the box, right, and expected Cam Scatterboo to run early, they beat him over the top with the passing attack. You look statistically, Iowa State only giving up 161 passing yards per game, 52% completion percentage. But the way and you beat Iowa State typically is in terms of you run the football. Could be a big day for Damian Martinez, that offense for Miami, averaging 179 rushing yards per game. They're throwing for 359 through the air with Cam Ward. I think they look to run it first, work off a play action, and Ward might get to 400, 450. This game might be a shootout, too. I just think from a motivational standpoint, knowing how Iowa State performed in the Big 12 championship, knowing that they lost to Memphis in the bowl game last year, this is a bigger game, in my opinion, for Iowa State to make a statement. I think they look to push around Miami, and we've seen Miami play down to the level of comp. I'll take the points with Iowa State here.
The Cyclones only an underdog one time this year, early on in the season, in their first FBS game in the in-state showdown. That is the Cy-Hawk game against Iowa. They came back in the second half, won that game outright, catching around a field goal. Here they are getting 4.5. Under Matt Campbell, when he took the reins in Ames back in 2016, they are 26-18-1 against the spread as a dog. Very profitable. This Iowa State team, though, a little different than years past, at least in what they do up front physically, as Joe alluded to. 4th best passing defense by the stats, only giving up 162 yards per game. As Kev alluded to, in their step-ups in competition against those lethal aerial attacks, like Cam Ward and Miami present, some big numbers to be had. Here is where the Clones have struggled all year long on the ground. They're allowing nearly 180 yards per game on the ground this season. Second worst in the Big 12, Kev. Only Oklahoma State giving up more than that. We're not entirely sure who we're going to see today for Miami, but I do believe there will be a lot of an emphasis on that ground attack to complement Cam Ward as well.
Yeah, the thing is, for Miami this year, yards per play, they were 0.5 yards better than the second best team in college football. So to give you an idea, the gap between 1 and 2 was the gap between about 2 and 13. Miami was the best offense in the country, bar none. Either way, they could get it, which would, if by chance it comes out that Cam Ward is not going to play, this line is going to shift massively.
Yeah.
If I could get 3.5, I'm talking plus 3.5 with Miami, I think they could still hang inside this game. Another reason I am backing off the side in this one game here, because I agree with you. Iowa State sending out just about everybody. They definitely care about this one.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Matt Campbell cares about it, right? You know, he was known as an underdog coach and, again, hasn't stepped up in critical big spots over the past couple of years, especially in championship or bowl type of situations. This is an opportunity to get recruiting. This is an opportunity to knock off a brand name in terms of Miami.
It's a really good point, though, too, Joe. Like, obviously, Miami controlled their destiny, and the loss to Syracuse hurt. Iowa State ended up closing as a favorite in that game against Arizona State. I mean, they got ran off the field in that one there. So, you know, if you're Matt Campbell, listen, we poke holes in every single resume outside of Georgia's in college football. The Iowa State resume this year, very underwhelming as well. You'd love to be able to add this to the season.
First ever 10-win season in program history and Ames. They looked for that first ever Big 12 title, but didn't come up short. More on Rocco Becht and the Clones in a little bit. More on the CFT Bowl Bonanza next.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
Like they may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today. They cover.
So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred, or just worked on the side, or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Live right here on College Football Today's Bowl Bonanza. 8 FBS bowl games on this final Saturday of 2024. An intriguing game as well as we get you set for the Independence Bowl between a ranked Army team who saw their rivals in Navy not only win the Army-Navy game, but also beat Oklahoma yesterday in the Armed Forces Bowl. And the reason this game is even more intriguing is because Army was set to take on, as the champions of the American, the champions of the Sun Belt, that would be Marshall. But Charles Huff left a team that won the Sun Belt to go to a one-win team at Southern Miss, and then everybody else jumped into the transfer portal, and Marshall was unable to field a team for this matchup against the Cadets. So step in, 5-7, Louisiana Tech. It is often done by a couple of academic ratios to fill in 5-win teams if they need those schools to fill into bowl games. This was done as a matter of convenience. So, Lisi guy, as we look at the number, Army laying more than 2 touchdowns against La Tech today. What do you make of the Independence?
Well, I think there's no doubt Army wins, but I like La Tech in terms of this matchup. The fact that they're actually in a bowl game, and I understand motivation. Where's this team heading into this matchup? They got to scrape the team together on a short notice. I still think they could be into this matchup, especially knowing that it's a 14.5-point number. Defensively, very good in terms of run support. They're only allowing 120 rushing yards per game, 3.3 yards per carry. Granted, they haven't faced a military academy this point in the season or all season long, but I still think they could keep it within the number, like the under 43.5. We know that Bryson Daly and that rushing attack are going to run it, averaging 298 on the ground. They lost to Navy in terms of the rivalry game. They want to show out 43.5, Kev, is the number. I like the under. I think Army wins, but I like La Tech and Evan Bullock, that methodical offense to keep it within margin. I think they're within the 14.5 today.
Yeah, the more you look at Louisiana Tech, again, I understand that this team was not supposed to be here, but to some degree, awesome that they are. Not because it's a great story. What a cover machine these guys are. I mean, they've covered 5 in a row, and not against lackluster competition.
No.
They narrowly and maybe should have upset Jacksonville State, who won that conference.
Yep.
They did upset Western Kentucky, who I believe played in that conference title game.
They did.
Covered against Arkansas. I know Kennesaw's not great, but they win 33-0. That's a cover as well. They hung with Sam Houston, who was good inside that conference. Again, this is a Louisiana Tech team that is absolutely playing their best football of the season, and they boasted the best rush defense on a yards per attempt basis in Conference USA.
Yeah.
I understand Army's another level, but again, we're getting 14.5 points with a team like Army, who we know isn't going to be going tempo. And one other interesting wrinkle. Kanye Udo hitting the portal and going from Army to Arizona State. Nobody does that. Nobody transfers out of these service academies, and transferring to Arizona State is obviously kind of a hilarious decision, but maybe suggest that Army, this group, maybe had eyes for something better. Didn't get it. Didn't show up in the game against Navy, call it what it was. Maybe they don't show up as well like people would expect here against La Tech.
If there's ever going to be buy-in, though, for a type of team, it would be a service academy in Army. They saw Navy win the Armed Forces Bowl yesterday. With that being said, though, they did have very high hopes of trying to make a historic season even more, one that is filled in the record books. 11 wins for Army, matching a program record with a victory today in the Independence Bowl in Shreveport. 12 wins for the Black Knights, the most ever in a single season in Army football program history. They've been playing ball in West Point for more than 130 years. But the Bulldogs of La Tech under Sonny Cumbie have been just that. Great dogs this year, Lisi guy, a perfect 5-0 against the spread. Of course, their biggest test today, slowing down Bryson Daly, who has a rushing yards prop of 149 and a hook.
Yeah, and his touchdown, what,
minus 850, I believe it is.
You're right. You got to take him for 2 or 3, and then you might as well take the over in terms of that matchup. I mean, Sonny Cumbie did a fantastic job when he was the offensive coordinator at Texas Tech. Now the head coach has done a pretty good job in terms of his tenure there. Again, methodical offense, great play caller. With the added preparation time, I think they could put up some points to keep them with the margin.
Minus 850 is light. Underscore. We've seen much higher numbers on 29 touchdowns this year.
I'm backing my guy. He spurned me against Navy. I'm back with Bryson Daly. We're back for hour 2 next.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
Like, they may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today, they cover.
So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred, or just worked on the side, or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on Sports.